Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at all things management and leadership.
Ooh, I love this topic.
I know, right? And you know what's so cool about this particular deep dive? We've got some awesome source material to work with.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
So we've got some lecture notes from Professor John Cousins,
Okay.
excerpts from his book. It's called MBA ASAP. And,
Touchy title.
right. And then we've even got his bio from his website.
So we're really getting a 360-degree view of this guy.
Totally. And you can tell that whoever sent this in is interested in not just the practical side of leading, but also like the deeper reasons behind why we lead and how we lead and all that good stuff.
The why behind the what.
Exactly. So I'm thinking
Yeah.
our mission today is going to be like, by the end of this deep dive, you'll have better idea of your own leadership style,
Okay.
some actual tools you can use,
Love that.
and maybe even some inspiration to,
Yeah.
really go after those big goals you've got.
I'm in. What do you say we jump right in?
Let's do it.
All right. So first things first.
Yeah.
Got to define our terms.
Okay.
Professor Cousins starts his lectures off with this question.
Okay.
What ICE management?
Ooh.
And how is that different from leadership?
It's a question that comes up all the time,
Right.
and it's one that people often mix up.
Totally.
Professor Cousins actually uses a quote to illustrate this point.
Oh, I love a good quote.
Me too. He says, leadership is the art of accomplishing more than the science of management says is possible.
Okay, so exceeding expectations instead of just like checking boxes.
That's a great way to put it.
I also found another quote in his notes that helped me kind of understand the difference.
Okay.
It says, the manager asks how and when, the leader asks what and why.
It is about different mindsets, isn't it?
It really is. It's almost like two different approaches.
Exactly. I think of it like that yin and yang symbol,
Okay, yeah.
Management is the yin. It's all about the practical stuff, the
Yeah.
how-tos, keeping things running smoothly.
Leadership is the yang. It's more about vision. Inspiration, the why behind the work.
I love that visual. It really helps.
They're separate, but they work together,
It's like yin and yang.
Exactly.
Okay, so full disclosure, sometimes when I hear all this talk about leadership, I think, okay, that's great for like Fortune 500 CEOs,
Yeah.
but not really for me,
I get that.
But Professor Cousins makes this point that I found so fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
He says that everyone is already managing a complex enterprise their own life.
I love that.
Right.
It's so
So
good.
like managing your money, you've got income expenses, you got to save.
It's like running a mini business.
Wow.
Right. So how do you approach your personal finances? Are you super organized? Or are you more like, we'll see what happens?
That's a really good point.
Our personal styles can tell us a lot about how we might approach managing things at work, too.
Okay, so we're all managers in a way.
In a way, yeah.
Now, this leads perfectly into another thing Professor Cousins talks about, authenticity. He even uses this phrase, Procrustes' bed.
Oh, yeah. Can you remind me about that one? It's a bit creepy.
Oh, it's from Greek mythology.
Right.
And this guy, Procrustes, would make his guests fit into this iron bed
Okay.
by like stretching them or chopping off their limbs.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's a little gruesome, but the metaphor is really powerful.
Yeah.
Like, trying to force ourselves into a mold of what we think a leader should be instead of just, being ourselves.
That's a recipe for disaster.
Totally. And Professor Cousins seems to really value individuality.
He does.
It's almost like he's saying be yourself, but like even more so.
Get yourself only more so. That's actually a direct quote from his lecture notes.
I knew I had heard it somewhere.
I love it.
And, his own career path. He talks about it in his MBA ASAP bio.
Yeah.
It's not exactly a straight line.
Not at all. Engineering, biotech, finance.
It's like he's living proof that there's no one right way to be a leader.
Exactly. What matters is using your own skills and experiences to your advantage.
Okay, so now I'm thinking I'm ready to embrace my authentic self.
Awesome.
Step into a leadership role, but where do I even start?
Well, Professor Cousins has some thoughts on that, too.
Okay.
In his second lecture, he poses this question.
Ooh, a question.
He asks, who is the most difficult person to manage?
Let me guess it's not my micromanaging boss.
Nope.
Or that coworker who never refills the coffee pot.
Not even close.
Okay, I give up. Who is it?
It's yourself.
Really?
He believes that self-mastery is like the foundation of good leadership.
So if you can't manage yourself, you can't manage other people.
Exactly. He even suggests creating a morning routine to set yourself up for success.
Ooh, a morning routine.
like an athlete training for a big race.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's about preparing your mind and body for the day ahead.
Does he give any other training tips, so to speak?
Oh, tons. He's big on healthy habits,
Okay.
sleep mindfulness, good food exercise,
Oh, the good stuff.
and of course, never stop learning.
Oh, yeah.
Read books, take online courses.
Listen to podcasts.
Exactly. Always be sharpening your mind.
I love it.
So we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have. We talked about managing versus leading.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that we're all managing our own lives in a way.
Right.
And the importance of authenticity and
The
self-management.
foundation of good leadership.
Exactly. So what's next on our leadership journey?
Well, now we move into the realm of influence and inspiration.
Ooh.
Two qualities that Professor Cousins believes really set leaders apart from managers.
Okay, so less about barking orders, more about inspiring people to follow you.
You got it.
Hmm.
He even quotes Harvard Business Review on this one.
Okay, let's hear it.
Influence and inspiration separate leaders from managers, not power and control.
I like that.
Right.
And who does he use as an example of this?
Steve Jobs.
Oh, wow.
Remember that famous Stanford commencement speech where he told everyone to follow their dreams?
Yeah,
And to see setbacks as opportunities for growth?
that was a good one.
We'll link to it in the show notes. It's a must-watch for any aspiring leader.
Perfect. All right, so our ideal leader is authentic, has their own life in order,
Mm-hmm.
and inspires rather than commands.
Sounds pretty good, right?
It does. But are there any specific skills we need to develop to actually make this all work?
Professor Cousins definitely thinks so.
Okay.
He breaks it down into 3 categories.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with category number
All
one.
right, the first one is words.
So basically communication skills.
Exactly.
Okay, so we left off on words as the first skill category. So public speaking, writing emails, all that good stuff.
You got it. Professor Cousins believes those skills are absolutely key for anyone who wants to be an effective leader.
Makes sense. You got to be able to get your point across.
Exactly. Think about it.
Okay.
Writing clear emails and memos, running productive meetings, giving presentations that inspire people to take action.
Yeah, if you can't communicate your ideas, what's the point, right?
Exactly. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are if no one understands what you're trying to say.
Communication, always a work in progress for me, but I'm working on it.
We all are. All right, so that's words. Ready for category number 2?
Hit me with it.
This one is numbers.
Ooh, numbers.
Now, before you get too intimidated,
Oh, I'm already intimidated.
Professor Cousins isn't saying that every leader needs to be a math whiz,
Okay, good, because I am not.
but he does stress the importance of being financially literate.
So, like, even if you're not the one crunching the numbers all day, you still need to understand the basics of budgeting,
Yeah,
financial statements, data analysis, all that stuff.
exactly. It's about understanding the financial impact of your decisions.
And making strategic choices that are good for the whole organization.
Right. Like you wouldn't try to steer a ship without knowing how to read a compass, would you?
That's a good analogy.
You got to know where you're going and how to get there.
Okay, 2 down, 1 to go. What's the final category?
This one's my favorite.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
It's personal attributes.
Okay, so this is where it gets really personal.
It does. We're talking about things like resilience, ethics, integrity, the ability to handle tough situations.
So it's not just about skills and knowledge.
Nope.
It's about who you are as a person.
Exactly. Think of it like the foundation of your leadership style.
Okay, I like that.
You could be a fantastic communicator and a numbers whiz,
Mm-hmm.
but if you lack integrity or crumble under pressure,
Your leadership is going to suffer.
exactly. It's like that saying, character is what you do when nobody's watching.
So true. Okay, I'm totally on board with this idea of personal attributes, but how do we actually cultivate them?
Well, Professor Cousins is a firm believer in the power of habit and small wins.
So like starting small and building from there.
Exactly. He even tells his students to make your bed first thing in the morning.
Wait, literally make the bed. What does that have to do with leadership?
It's a metaphor, of course.
Okay.
It's about starting your day with an act of discipline and self-control.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
He even links to a video of Admiral McRaven's famous commencement speech in his lecture notes.
The one where he talks about making your bed.
That's the one. The point is that even small wins can create a ripple effect of positive action throughout your day.
Okay, so it's about building momentum one small win at a time.
Exactly. He even calls these small wins micro-progress accomplishments. There's actually a New York Times article about this that we'll link in the show notes.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got these 3 categories: words, numbers, and personal attributes.
The trifecta of leadership skills.
But how do they all work together to make someone a truly effective leader?
That's where the idea of a bias toward action comes in.
Bias toward action. Okay, I'm listening.
Professor Cousins contrasts this with something he calls management dysfunction, which is all about fear and overthinking and getting bogged down in bureaucracy.
Oh man, I've definitely worked in places that suffered from management
I
dysfunction.
think we all have. So a bias toward action is about being proactive,
Okay.
taking risks, learning from your mistakes.
Less talking, more doing.
Exactly. But he acknowledges that this can be scary.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He talks about the fear of failure of looking stupid.
Those are real fears.
They are. He even quotes Meister Eckhart, act as if you were totally safe.
I love that quote.
It's about giving yourself permission to experiment and learn without being held back by fear.
Okay, that's something I need to work on for sure.
It's a journey for all of us.
So we've talked about managing yourself, honing those communication skills, being comfortable with numbers, building resilience, taking action. But is there something more to leadership than just getting things done?
That's a great question. And it leads us to a concept that Professor Cousins introduces called ikigai.
Ikigai. Okay, that sounds kind of mystical.
It is a bit. It's a Japanese concept that roughly translates to reason for being.
Reason for being... Okay, now, I'm really intrigued.
Professor Cousins describes it as the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for.
Wow, that's a lot to think about.
It is. But the idea is that you can find work that's not just a job, but something that truly brings you joy and fulfillment.
So it's not just about being successful.
No.
It's about finding meaning and purpose in your work.
Exactly. He even connects ikigai to the Holstein Manifesto. You know that one.
I've heard of it.
He talks about living a life filled with passion and purpose.
So we're not just striving to be effective leaders, we're also striving to live fulfilling lives.
Exactly. And this brings me to something that Professor Cousins asks in his fourth lecture.
Okay.
What qualities make someone worthy of being followed?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's not just about being the boss, right?
Right. He highlights things like inspiring others, being trustworthy, listening, well, giving credit where credit is due.
So building trust and creating a shared sense of purpose.
Exactly. It's about character integrity and the ability to connect with people on a human level.
And it's interesting that he dedicates his lectures to his father,
I noticed that too.
who he says embodied these very traits.
He clearly sees those qualities as the foundation of true leadership.
It's nice to be reminded that even someone as accomplished as Professor Cousins finds inspiration in his own family.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot: managing versus leading, managing ourselves,
Authenticity.
influence, essential skills, overcoming fear, taking action, finding our ikigai.
And the qualities that make someone a truly great leader.
Phew. What else is there?
Well, all of those pieces lead up to what Professor Cousins considers the ultimate goal, leading with vision and strategy.
Okay, so this is the big picture stuff.
It is. He argues that true leadership is about more than just managing tasks.
Mm-hmm.
It's about creating a compelling vision for the future.
Like painting a picture of where you want to go.
Exactly. And then having a clear strategy for how to get there.
So you need the big picture vision and then the step-by-step plan to make it happen.
Exactly. And communication is key throughout the whole process.
So making sure everyone understands the vision and the plan.
And feels motivated to contribute.
It's almost like telling a story, isn't it? A story that captures people's imagination and makes them want to be a part of something bigger than themselves.
That's a great way to put it. A compelling vision needs a strong narrative, a clear purpose, characters, or in this case, team members that people can connect with.
Okay, this is making me rethink how I communicate my own ideas.
I love it. It's all about finding those creative ways to connect with people.
Okay, but all this talk about vision and strategy makes me think about the practical side of things, too.
Uh-huh.
Like, what about the actual mechanics of managing a team or a project?
Professor Cousins dives into that as well. He starts by talking about the importance of understanding the different parts of a business.
Okay.
Things like managing people, communication, organizational structured finances processes, and of course the actual products or services that a business provides.
So seeing the whole ecosystem of a business and how all those pieces fit together?
Exactly. And then he breaks down each element in more detail. For
Yeah.
example, when it comes to managing people, he stresses the importance of understanding human motivation,
Okay.
creating a positive and supportive environment, fostering a culture of collaboration and respect.
So it's not just about assigning tasks and barking orders.
Nope.
More about empowering people to do their best work.
That's the idea. He even briefly mentions the #MeToo movement in his notes, which shows that he recognizes how important it is to create a safe and inclusive work environment.
That's crucial, especially today.
It is. So we've talked about managing people. What about communication in the context of managing a team or a project?
Yeah, we've talked about communication skills in general,
Right.
but how does that play out in a real-world setting?
Well, Professor Cousins emphasizes that clear communication is essential at every stage of a project.
Okay.
He talks about being transparent, actively listening to your team, providing regular feedback, both positive and constructive.
So just keeping everyone in the loop.
Exactly. If people don't understand the big picture or how their work fits into it, they're not going to be very motivated or effective.
Right. It's like you said before, communication is key.
It is. And remember, communication isn't just about giving directions.
Hmm.
It's also about encouraging open dialogue, being receptive to feedback.
So fostering trust and building relationships.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And speaking of trust and relationships, there's another crucial aspect of management that Professor Cousins focuses on.
Okay. Decision making.
Ooh, decision making. That's a big one.
It is. And it can feel really high stakes, especially when you're responsible for an entire team or project.
So how do we make good decisions, especially under pressure?
Well, Professor Cousins offers some practical advice.
Okay.
He talks about gathering all the relevant information, considering different perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
weighing the potential risks and rewards, and ultimately making a choice and moving forward.
That sounds logical enough, but what happens when you're stuck between two equally good options?
That's when things get tricky.
Or what if you're just not sure what the right answer is?
In those situations, Professor Cousins argues that sometimes you just have to trust your gut,
Our intuition.
that little voice inside that often guides us in the right direction, even if we can't always explain why.
Okay, so there's a place for intuition in decision making. There is. But he also emphasizes the importance of using data and analysis to support your decisions.
So it's not just about gut feelings, it's about backing those feelings up with facts and figures.
Exactly. And this is where those number skills we talked about earlier come in handy.
Right, being comfortable with data and financial concepts can help you make smarter decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is all starting to connect for me. So we've got managing people, communication, decision making. Is there anything else we need to know about this whole management thing?
Well, Professor Cousins also talks about the importance of having a strong organizational structure.
Okay.
He mentions the idea of hierarchy,
Hmm.
but he also emphasizes the importance of being flexible and adaptable.
So having systems in place, but also being able to adjust when needed.
Exactly. And he dives into the need for clear processes for getting things done
So everyone knows what's expected of them.
and how things work.
Makes sense.
Uh,
Is there a particular style of management that he seems to favor?
He seems to lean towards a more collaborative approach
Yeah.
where teams have the autonomy to make decisions and contribute their ideas.
I like that.
He also talks about the importance of pace and cadence in business.
Pace and cadence, what does that even mean?
It's about knowing when to move quickly and when to slow down.
Okay.
Sometimes you need to be aggressive and disrupt things to stay ahead of the competition,
Right.
and other times you need to be more deliberate and focus on quality and precision.
So it's like knowing when to sprint and when to pace yourself during a marathon.
Exactly. A good leader needs to be able to adjust their approach based on the situation and the needs of their team.
This is a lot to take in. I'm starting to realize that management is a lot more complex than I initially thought.
It is. It's a multifaceted skill set that requires a lot of different qualities and abilities.
Well, I'm glad we're breaking it all down.
Me too.
Yeah.
And there's one more concept that Professor Cousins introduces that I think is particularly relevant.
Oh, what's that?
He calls it entrepreneurial thinking.
So even if I'm not starting my own business, I can still benefit from thinking like an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. He describes entrepreneurial thinking as a mindset that embraces innovation, creativity, and taking calculated risks.
So it's about being proactive, spotting opportunities, and not being afraid to try new things, even if they might fail.
Exactly. He argues that this kind of thinking is essential for success in today's world.
It's a fast-paced world we live in.
It is. Things are changing so quickly that you have to be adaptable, resourceful, and constantly looking for ways to improve and innovate.
That's so true. It's about constantly learning and evolving, not just getting stuck in the same old routines.
Exactly. I think that's a key takeaway from Professor Cousins' work overall. Leadership is an ongoing journey of learning, growth, and self-discovery.
Not just a destination, but a journey.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been a whirlwind tour of the mechanics of management. I feel like I'm starting to see the bigger picture of how all these pieces fit together.
Me too.
Yeah.
We've covered vision strategy, people management, communication, decision-making, entrepreneurial thinking.
It's a lot.
It is. But we've laid a really strong foundation.
And is there anything else we need to cover?
Just one more crucial element of leadership:
Okay, I'm all ears.
ethics.
Ethics, that's a big one.
It is. And especially with all the scandals and ethical lapses we see in the news these days,
Yeah.
it's more important than ever.
Absolutely. So what does Professor Cousins have to say about ethical leadership?
Well, he dedicates a whole section of his lectures to this topic.
Okay.
He's a big believer in leading with integrity, honesty, and courage.
So it's not just about being effective.
Yeah.
It's about being a good person and doing the right thing even when it's hard.
You got it. He talks about the importance of setting a good example.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. And remember how we were talking about self-mastery earlier?
Yeah.
Well, Professor Cousins reminds us that the most difficult person to lead is often ourselves.
That's so true. It's easy to point fingers at others, but real leadership starts with holding ourselves accountable.
He talks about this idea of moral authority.
Moral authority.
The idea that true leadership doesn't come from power or position, but from integrity and ethical behavior.
So it's not about demanding respect. It's about earning it through your actions.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
He also talks about some of the challenges that leaders face when it comes to ethics.
Like what?
Things like the temptations of power.
Oh, yeah. Power can corrupt.
It can. And the dangers of anger and resentment, and the importance of building trust and honesty within a team.
So how can we as aspiring leaders navigate those ethical dilemmas?
Professor Cousins emphasizes clear communication, setting realistic expectations, and having systems in place to identify and address ethical issues before they spiral out of control.
So it's not just about good intentions.
Right.
It's about having structures and processes in place to support ethical decision-making.
Exactly. And it's an ongoing process.
Okay.
Ethical leadership requires constant vigilance, self-reflection, and a willingness to learn and grow.
Wow, this is all so important. It's easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle of business,
I know what you mean.
hitting those targets, meeting deadlines.
But ultimately, leadership is about people.
So well said.
It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to do their best work.
I love that. It's about remembering that business is ultimately a human endeavor and that our actions as leaders have a real impact on the lives of others.
That brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive.
Already. Wow, time flies when you're having fun.
It does. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still one more piece of the puzzle to explore.
Okay, I can't wait. What's next?
In the final part, we're going to zero in on something that's been a recurring theme throughout our conversation: the crucial link between management leadership and communication.
Ooh, I'm ready for part 3.
Uh,
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into management and leadership, and I'm really excited to explore this link between management, leadership, and communication.
it's a fitting way to wrap things up,
Yeah.
because as we've seen from Professor Cousins' lectures, effective communication is really the key to it all.
It really is. Like he says, even the most brilliant ideas are useless if you can't communicate them effectively. So where do we even begin with all this communication stuff?
Well, Professor Cousins emphasizes that, first and foremost, communication is a two-way street.
Okay.
It's not just about broadcasting your message. It's about actively listening and seeking to understand the other person's perspective.
That makes sense. It's about building connections, not just talking at people.
Exactly.
So what are some of his specific tips for being a better listener?
Well, he talks a lot about what he calls active listening,
Active listening.
really tuning in to what the other person is saying, both verbally and non-verbally.
So paying attention to body language, to tone of voice, all those subtle cues.
Exactly. It's about showing that you're genuinely engaged and that you value their input.
And that builds trust and rapport.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
He also emphasizes the importance of empathy in communication,
Empathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
trying to understand their feelings and motivations, even if you don't agree with them.
Even if you don't agree with them.
It's not about condoning bad behavior or anything like that. It's about finding ways to connect with people on a human level and creating an environment where everyone feels heard and respected.
Especially when there's conflict or disagreement.
Oh, yeah. A little empathy can go a long way in those situations.
It can help you find common ground and a solution that works for everyone.
Exactly.
I've definitely learned that the hard way, trying to force my way through a disagreement, never ends well.
It rarely does.
Okay, so we've talked about listening with empathy, but what about crafting our own messages?
Ah, yes, the art of getting your point across.
How do we make sure our messages are clear, concise, and compelling?
Professor Cousins breaks down communication into three main categories:
Oh,
writing meetings and public speaking.
the trifecta of communication.
He has practical tips for each one, but the overarching theme is clarity and intentionality.
So knowing what you want to say and saying it in a way that people will understand.
Exactly. Let's start with writing.
Okay.
He stresses the importance of being clear and concise.
Get to the point.
Your goal is to convey information effectively,
Yeah.
not to impress people with your vocabulary.
So no need for big words or long, winding sentences.
Keep it simple. Use clear language and structure your writing in a way that's easy to follow.
Whether it's an email, a memo, a report.
Whatever it is, make sure your message is clear.
Makes sense.
All right, what about meetings?
Meetings.
I know, right? But they're a necessary evil sometimes.
They are, but how do we make sure our meetings are actually productive and not a total waste of time?
Well, Professor Cousins is a big believer in having a clear purpose for every meeting,
Okay.
a structured agenda, and a set time limit.
No meandering discussions that go nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He also talks about the importance of active participation
So everyone should have a role to play.
and feel comfortable contributing their ideas.
It's not just about the leader dictating what needs to happen.
Right. It's about leveraging the collective wisdom and creativity of the group.
Okay, so writing and meetings now for the big one.
Public speaking.
Any tips for those of us who get terrified at the thought of speaking in front of a crowd?
Professor Cousins actually offers some great advice for overcoming stage fright.
Okay, I'm all ears.
He recommends practicing beforehand, knowing your material cold, and focusing on connecting with your audience.
Instead of worrying about being perfect.
Exactly. It's about passion and authenticity, not perfection.
That makes me feel a little better.
And he's a big believer in the power of storytelling.
Storytelling.
Weaving stories into your presentations can make your message more memorable and help you connect with the audience on an emotional level.
That's so true. A good story can make any topic more interesting.
Exactly. He even suggests taking a public speaking course, and specifically mentions Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie, the master of communication.
He was.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Listening, empathizing, writing meetings, public speaking.
The essential elements of communication.
But how does all of this tie back to leadership?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that all of these communication skills are absolutely essential for effective leadership.
So it's not just a nice-to-have skill.
Not at all.
It's the foundation of everything a leader does.
Exactly. And it's a skill that can be learned and developed over time.
So even if you're not a naturally gifted speaker or writer,
You can still become a great communicator through practice and effort.
that's good to know.
And remember, good communication isn't just about getting your point across.
It's about so much more.
It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and creating a more positive and productive work environment for everyone.
Wow, this deep dive has been so eye-opening.
I know, right? Professor Cousins has given us so much to think about.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what it means to be an effective manager and leader.
Me too. And you know what's great? He's got tons of resources available online.
Oh yeah, like what?
He's got a website, a podcast, a YouTube channel, even online courses.
We'll make sure to include all of those in the show notes.
Awesome. So you can keep learning and exploring all these ideas.
I love it. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's worth reflecting on Professor Cousins' own journey.
You know, you're right.
He didn't follow a linear path, he wasn't afraid to reinvent himself, and he clearly never stopped learning and growing.
That's such a great reminder that leadership isn't a destination, it's a lifelong journey.
It is a journey filled with challenges, opportunities, and constant learning.
Exactly. And remember,
Yeah.
the world needs your unique contribution.
What impact will you make?
That's the question we should all be asking ourselves.
That's a great note to end on, something for all of us to ponder as we go about our lives and our work.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been another amazing deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time.
Don't forget to make your bed.
And remember to lead with intention, clarity, and a whole lot of heart.